Hello everyone, and welcome to Slice, Print, Roleplay. In this video, I'm going to give you my review of the Ortur Laser Master II Pro S2. Alright, let's get to it. So before we go any further, I want to give a huge shout out to Kyle, Peter, Raphael, and Matthew. They are my newest supporters on Patreon, and I wanted to thank each and every one of them. Your support helps me do so many new things with the channel and improve my videos in so many countless ways. Thank you so much for your support. Alright, so first off, I want to be transparent. This unit was sent to me so that I could complete this review. I did not purchase it. However, anytime a company reaches out about a review, my response is always the same. I will review their product, but only if I am allowed to give my open and honest opinion about both the pros and the cons that I encounter, and also if I can give an accurate representation of my experience with it. So in other words, if I encounter something that nobody else is seeing, but it's still a problem that I encountered, I'm going to talk about it, just because I can only accurately report on the experience that I have in my own hands with a unit. So anytime that you're seeing a review from me, it is going to be as honest as I can make it, because if my reviews aren't honest and my videos aren't honest, then there's really no point in me making them because they don't carry any weight in the community. So just wanted to get that out of the way. And to that end, I do want to say real quick, I like this unit. Overall, I had really good experiences with it. I got some really good results with it, and I do like it, and I think that I would recommend it. But I do want to talk about some of the negative experiences that I had, because there's only a couple, and I think we'll get through them pretty quickly, and the rest that I have to say is pretty positive and just kind of going over my experience with it. So let's start with that. Alright, so there were 3 issues that I encountered. All of them revolved around documentation or lack thereof. The first one was a pretty big concern for me because it's a potential safety issue, and that is the safety glasses that came with this unit. There is no marking on these. There's also nothing in the documentation to tell me what these are rated for, so I can't confirm that they will actually keep me safe from the laser that they sent me. Now, I don't know that they won't keep me safe, but I can't confirm that they will. And that's a big deal for me with a pretty dangerous hobby. You don't want to take risks on any kind of safety equipment or any safety precautions or procedures. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep yourself and anyone else that might be in the area that you're using this at as safe as possible. That's going to be my first of many PSAs, and I apologize in advance, but it's kind of a big deal, and I just want to make sure that I touch on it occasionally. So what I did was reach out to a friend of mine. Huge shout out to Xavier, by the way. They helped me avoid a lot of potential pitfalls I could see people falling into with this hobby, or at least when they're first getting into this hobby. And they had recommended these. I also found these listed on many different forums as far as recommendations for the best safety equipment that you can get for these laser engraving units. So definitely these were like, I think $35, but I could confirm that they were going to keep me safe from this and many other types of lasers. And I felt a lot more confident and comfortable wearing these, knowing that I was giving myself the best protection, at least within reason, that I could. Even still, while wearing these, I looked at the laser as little as possible, which is what I would recommend you do. Just minimize your exposure as much as you can. So yeah, just wanted to point that out, that I was a little disappointed to see that I couldn't confirm what safety rating these were. If you're like me and you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself as safe as possible, you can find these listed down in the description below. Otherwise, I would absolutely recommend that you do whatever you can to confirm that the glasses that you're using are keeping you safe from the unit that you have. Alright, so this next one is a lot less severe, but it's still a concern for me and a little frustrating. I finished the assembly process, which went well. I was able to use their assembly guide and their assembly video, and I got this done in about a little over an hour, just because I was going back and making sure that I was doing everything correctly, with this being my first laser engraving unit. But when I was done the assembly process, I ended up with these parts, and only a vague idea of what they were. They're listed in the parts manual as being air assist parts, but there's no explanation as to what that means or how they're supposed to be used. So that was a bit confusing for me. Again, I reached out to Xavier, and they were able to explain that an air assist, if you're unfamiliar, is a pump that will be mounted onto your unit and will pump air directly into the area that you're cutting with the laser. And this will blow debris out as it's cutting, and also potentially snuff out any flames that will spur up whenever you're going through the cutting process. Spur? I don't know if that's the right term, but whatever. Flare up, we'll say, yeah. That will potentially flare up during the cutting process. So it sounds like these are much more beneficial. An air assist unit is much more beneficial to the cutting process than the engraving process. And I do appreciate that they included these, but it is a little frustrating to not have any explanation as to what they are or where they go, because I got to the end of the assembly process, I have these bags of parts, and I'm wondering what I missed or what I screwed up, and it caused some confusion for a little while, and I would really like to see that addressed. All right, so the third and final issue that I encountered was the most minor, but it's also one of the most confusing for me because they failed to highlight a feature of this unit that is really cool. So in the documentation, their pictures show an entirely different laser module. So if you don't know, with this base framework, you can purchase different modules for different uses. With this module, there's not as much documentation on it as far as I could find, but the module that's listed in the assembly guide comes with a cylinder to help you gauge the distance between the laser and the working surface that you're going to be cutting or engraving. And obviously I didn't receive that, so I reached out to the rep and said, hey, what's the process for gauging the distance for this laser module to make sure that I have a good distance between my working area and the laser? And they sent me back a picture just with a green highlight mark saying, oh, it's here. And after looking at this for a little while, I did find that there is a little kickstand that comes down, and that's how you gauge the distance. And the fact that that's not highlighted, the only thing I could find that even references it is in their product page for this unit. They basically say that it's like an adjustable or a retractable focal gauge. I think that's pretty much the only thing they say. So it's one little line of text. They mention it one time. There's no pictures. And I think that's a huge misstep to not even just have a picture or like a GIF just showing that this is a really cool little feature that folds up inside. It's always going to be there. You're never going to lose it. Is really, really cool. And I hope that I see that adjusted in the future, that they just throw a quick picture up along with that little text showing this in use, so that it's not as confusing whenever you have this module. Oh, and there is one other discrepancy that I wanted to mention. You can see here on the product page, it says that the maximum engraving speed is 15,000 millimeters per minute. However, over here on the product documentation, it says 10,000 millimeters per minute. I'm guessing that's the difference between two different laser modules, and they just haven't updated that information, but the fact that it's inconsistent is a little confusing. But that was it. As far as issues that I encountered, everything was on the documentation side. The unit itself was extremely well packaged. Everything was in good condition. No parts were bent. There was no threads that were tapped crooked or anything like that. Everything assembled really well, and their build guide was really clear. So honestly, the assembly process was one of the easiest parts, second only to the software side. Getting this set up in Lightburn was literally just like 3 clicks. I'll show a quick video of that in a little bit. But yeah, overall, I was really happy with this and how easy it was to get set up and get going. To that end, I decided to kind of do just a minimal research to understand the basics of using this unit. Obviously, I did extensive research into the safety aspect of it. Again, there's that quick PSA. But otherwise, I just kind of got up and running with this to see what kind of results I could get without doing a ton of research, because I wanted that sort of like new user experience. And I got pretty good results. Sorry, there is one more thing I wanted to mention, just in case you're watching this video and you don't really know that much about laser engravers. It's really important to use a board like this, some kind of sacrificial board, underneath your laser engraver, so that whatever you're engraving or cutting, if the laser goes past it, which if you're cutting, it's going to, obviously, but when it goes past it, it's going to burn into your sacrificial board underneath, rather than your working table or whatever surface you have. It's really important. Also make sure that it's as flat as you can get it. This isn't a great option because it does have some deviation, but it was all I had at the time. And this is important because it's really easy, as I found, even just calibrating, to go too far and absolutely cause some pretty serious damage to this material. So having the sacrificial board did save my table. So there's just another quick tip for you. Hopefully you will avoid that by having a scrap board underneath. So when a representative from Sinis contacted me and asked if I wanted to test this unit to provide my review, I had to think about it for a few days. I wanted to make sure that before I accepted, I had at least a basic understanding for this technology and at least one idea for how this could be used to improve your tabletop games. Because when it comes down to it, whether I'm using a 3D printer or some other type of tech, I want to make sure that I am providing content to help you have a better experience with your tabletop games, or give your players a better experience, or just make it more unique and custom to your playing style in general. After a little bit of time, I came up with an idea I was pretty excited about. So the idea that I had for using a laser engraver to improve your tabletop games was to use it to engrave a dungeon map. Now, you could use this process for anything, but I specifically was thinking about a dungeon. So I started looking at pre-generated images like what you're seeing here, and while I think these would have worked depending on the one that I chose, Ultimately, I decided it would be a lot more fun if I found a program that would allow me to generate maps and make them custom for each session or each encounter. So I looked at quite a few different programs and eventually found one that was easy to use, gave me exactly the results I was looking for, was easy to edit, and exported everything in a format that I could just bring right into Lightburn and get going with. And this is what I found. This is the dungeon generator from Mythical Inc., and as you can see, it's exactly what I was looking for. It will allow you to randomly generate a dungeon, and then you can edit that, or you can create it from scratch to fit exactly what you're looking for. Now, there are two settings here that I would recommend using if you want to get a really clean engraving, and that's going to be to use straight lines for your floor tiles and to use a white background. Straight lines because that's going to be a lot easier for the software to pick up and keep consistent across the entirety of your working area, and you want to use a white background because if you use a colored background, it can be a little confusing for the software and it might think that you're trying to engrave the background. So by using white, you focus on only the area that you want to be engraved. As far as the theme goes, obviously you can use whatever you want. There's a couple of different options here. I really liked using solid walls because it went with the aesthetic that I was going for. And then the only other thing that I would recommend doing is measure your working area. It's going to be really, really important for this, or really for any project, but especially for this. In my case, I was using these Basswood sheets that were 12 by 12 by 1/8 of an inch. True size was a little closer to 11 3/4, which isn't a big deal. Just make sure that you measure the material you're going to be using so that you know what its true size is and you can adjust your image accordingly. So after I measured the material I was going to be working with and I knew its exact dimensions, I came back into the Mythical Inc. software and I changed my grid to 11 by 11 because, at least in D&D, you want your the grid for your map to be 1 inch by 1 inch squares. And I couldn't really have a full 1 inch by 1 inch if I was using a 12-inch grid because my Basswood would not allow that. So what I ended up doing was shrinking this down to 11 by 11 and simply scaling the image up just slightly in Lightburn so that my grid was a little bit larger than what would be considered standard, but that was really important to me to have it be close, but also be able to have the margins of the dungeon map match up with the margins of the Basswood and have it take up pretty much the entire area. So I made those adjustments, edited just a couple of things here and there to make it fit more of what I was looking for as far as the dungeon I had in mind, and then I just saved the image and I brought it over to Lightburn. Now it's important that I explain I didn't do any calibrations for this unit. I just brought the image over, used all the defaults that came up, and gave it a shot to see what would happen.
And this is how that turned out. Now, there's two things you'll probably notice here pretty quickly. First being that it's very light. It's obviously not the kind of dark contrast that I wanted the image to be against this lighter background. The other thing you'll probably notice is that my margins here are off a little bit. They should have been shifted this way by about roughly 2 millimeters or so. Otherwise though, it looks pretty good. It's certainly playable. I can use it on my table. Given the fact that I got this result after basically less than 3 hours of having this unit built, getting the software downloaded, doing a very minimal amount of education about the software and the unit itself. I kind of wanted to do the out-of-the-box experience. With the exception of safety procedures, I did absolutely go over those meticulously and make sure that I was following those, and I absolutely recommend you do as well. I'm going to keep hammering that home because this is a very, very important topic here. So forgive me if that gets a bit old. But yeah, these results are pretty great and I'm pretty excited about them. From here, I decided that the next best thing for me to do would be to calibrate the unit to see how I could improve these results.
So real quick, I want to show how easy it is to get the Laser Master 2 Pro S2 connected to your PC and set up in Lightburn. Literally all I did was download the Lightburn software, agree to their disclosures, and then it comes up with this window here where it's asking you to either find a laser or manually import one. From here, all you have to do is make sure that the unit is turned on, connected to your PC, and then hit Find My Laser. Then I'm going to hit Next. It'll think for a few minutes, and then it will pull in the laser, all of its specifications and its parameters, and then you're done. That's it, and you can get started. I really appreciate just how easy this process is, and within less than a minute, I am ready to go and get started. So as it turns out, Lightburn makes it extremely easy for you to run calibration tests. You literally just come up to Laser Tools and then choose the test that's going to calibrate the function that you're currently working with. So material test is what you'd want to use for calibrating your engraving settings. From here, I really didn't change much. I only changed the minimum speed to 1,000, and I changed the maximum speed to 10,000 because that was the lesser of the two max engraving speeds, the discrepancy that we found in the documentation. So I went with 10,000. Otherwise, I left everything where it was, the minimum power at 10%, maximum power at 100%, and then I hit start, hoping that I would get a good range of tests so that I could see what settings would give me the best results for my dungeon tiles. But that's not what happened. So yeah, this is how that turned out. On the bright side though, I was able to test the fire detection function of the unit and confirm that it did work perfectly. So once it detected a moderate amount of smoke, it moved the laser head back to the home position and killed power to the laser immediately. So I really appreciate that I was able to get that tested. I did have a test planned for later on, but this saved me the trouble. Basically what's going on here, and I'm sure there's a reason that it's set up this way. I don't quite understand it, but I'm sure there's a good reason for it. What's happening is that it's starting at the lowest possible speed you have set, which for me was 1,000 millimeters per minute, and it's moving across and increasing in increments of power to the laser. So we're starting at 10%, and you can see that 10% at 1,000 millimeters per second or per minute is going to create a very deep and very dark burn. And then as we're moving up, it's only getting darker until eventually it's just literally burning through the material itself. So what I ended up doing in order to get a good test range was simply just flip the values. So what you're doing when you flip those values is that you're now causing the test to start at the highest movement speed you have set and the highest laser output and work its way downward from there. And you can see that that resulted in a much cleaner test that gives me a lot more data rather than burning itself out within the first few minutes of the test. I end up getting this really wide range of tests that gives me a lot of data that I can then look at and come up with really good values that's going to give me the results that I want from my engraving.
So after I finished that calibration, I took the values I thought looked the best, put them into Lightburn, and this is the result I got. Obviously much better. This is much closer to what I was looking for. I also worked a bit harder to make sure that my margins were pretty much perfect. I'm really happy that I was able to use a lot more of this surface. The only issues that I really see with this one is that I do have some lighter areas here in the center. Now that very well could be from the fact that this board is also a little warped. I would think that with it being warped inward or towards the laser, that this would be darker rather than lighter. It could also be maybe I was moving too quickly. I'm still kind of learning this technology, but like I said, much better results, much cleaner, much closer to what I'm looking for. And I was really happy with that. So I continued tweaking, continued kind of looking at my results, and then I ended up doing another one that I think looks even better. So here's the next one. And you can see that there are still some lighter areas here, but overall looking even better. And you can tell that my confidence is sort of growing. So each one of these that I show you, you can see that I'm using more and more of this area. So I'm getting more and more confident. With this one, I actually took that software and made some customization to it. So this originally started as just this area. I added some over here, added some here, because I wanted to see if I could line these up and start building myself an actual dungeon, which is how I came about with this. So you can see that my margins on this one were slightly off, so there's a little bit more of a gap here than what I would have liked, but certainly not enough for me to be concerned with. I would still use this in my games with no issue. And yeah, you can now see I'm kind of putting this dungeon together. So within, I think each one of these took about 40 minutes. So in under 2 hours, I had a pretty decent sized dungeon going, and I could build off of this much, much faster than I could with really any other technology that I'm currently using. So this was a lot of fun, and I was really excited to see this start coming together. But I did have another idea.
So after I created a few of those dungeon tiles and I saw my results continuously improve, I thought it would be a fun challenge to try to make tokens to use on those dungeon tiles. While looking into different programs for making my own tokens, I eventually landed on dndcompendium.com. This site has a couple of really great resources for different tools that you can use to make tokens, but they also have a couple of pre-made token collections, and they were exactly what I was looking for. Each one of these drive folders has a ton of different tokens that you can choose from, so there's a good chance that you'll find just about anything that you're looking for.
So I confirmed, at least for my table, these will absolutely work as monster tokens or NPCs or even player characters if you need something quick. Once I understood the settings that I needed to get these images to look good and get clean cuts, I was able to get all of these set up and knocked out. Each one took about 10 minutes using the settings that I had, and I think that they're great. So that was cool enough, and you can certainly use these. I made them a little oversized because I wanted to make sure the images would look pretty crisp, but you can certainly use them as tokens just on the board itself if you're in a pinch. But I decided to take it one step further and see if I could build off of this even a little bit more. So after I made these tokens, I started thinking about it and realized there really isn't any reason that I couldn't use the cutting function of this unit to make bases for them so they could stand up on your table like this. So I jumped onto Lightburn, added a couple of rectangles, made some cuts, and within 5 or 10 minutes I had this done. Now there's two things about this that I was excited to see. First off, I was excited that despite the fact I had two cuts, this inner cut here for the actual token, and then the outer cut to cut the base away from the board, I was worried that this area here between the cuts would be weak from just having that much heat on either side of it. But what I found was it's just as strong as the surrounding material. It didn't lose any stability at all, which means that when this is getting cut, the heat and the focus is going exactly where you need it to be and making precise cuts, almost like it's a laser. So I was really excited to see that. But the other thing that I was excited to see, when it comes to 3D printers, I'm used to having to tweak your settings, tweak your hardware to get a little closer to where you want to be as far as your tolerances go. So I expected the same thing to happen with this unit, or similarly with laser engravers in general. And I opened up this hole by about, I think, 0.03, just to add that tolerance a little bit. And what I found when I put this together is this slides through with almost no friction. So it's perfect. Basically, if I would have cut this where I thought it needed to be, it would have fit snugly right where I wanted it to be without any kind of glue or needing anything like that. As it stands now, it's kind of nice that they're interchangeable. You can kind of pull this off and put your tokens away and lay them all flat. So it kind of worked out. But what this tells me is that I didn't need that extra tolerance. The unit is pretty much perfect out of the box as far as the way that it was cutting. Now, I don't know if all units are going to be like that, but mine was pretty much dead on, and I was excited to see that. So what I found was this base was a little bit unstable. So I jumped back into Lightburn, modeled up a slightly bigger base, and yeah, worked out really well. Oh, and there's something else that's worth noting. This is a pretty common build volume for a 3D printer. So this is 300 millimeters by 300 millimeters. And I think it's really funny that the Basswood sheets that I got are almost identical. They're so close, a few millimeters off, but honestly, it's close enough that I would consider it to be more or less the same. And this isn't even the full build volume of the Laser Master II Pro S2. It can do 400 millimeters by 400 millimeters, so a bit bigger than this anyway. But I think it's really fun that if I were to try to 3D print something, even if it was only like 1 millimeter tall, if I tried to 3D print something that would be even close to this kind of definition, would take probably 3 or 4 times the amount of time that it took to do this. So this was 40 minutes to 3D print something at this size and get good quality from it from a standard unit like this would take probably 5 or 6 hours. So I think that it's really worth mentioning that if you're looking to kind of get something done quick and you like the way that this looks, if this is fitting the kind of style or aesthetic you're going for, a laser engraver might be a really good option to get things done quickly. Because like I said, these all took about 40 minutes. So I just thought that was worth mentioning.
So now that we're nearing the end of this video, I wanted to take a minute to say thank you to Sinis for sending this unit out. Clearly, I had a lot of fun with this thing, and I'm really excited to see what other ways I can come up with to incorporate laser engraving and laser cutting in my tabletop games. So what are my final thoughts for the Ortur Laser Master II Pro S2? Well, despite the problems that I found with the documentation, I really had a good time using this unit. It was easy to set up on the hardware side and software side. I would say that most people can be up and running with this unit in 90 minutes, and that's even if you have no experience with engravers, as I didn't when I first got this unit. On top of that, I got some pretty good results from this unit without doing any kind of calibrations. I just made sure that I understood the basics of using Lightburn, I set my laser distance correctly using the little retractable kickstand on the module, and I used all the default settings that populated in Lightburn whenever I connected the S2 to my PC. So in like 90 minutes or less, you can have this unit assembled, connected to your PC, and have your first test underway. And honestly, I love that. I love the fact that I knew virtually nothing about laser engravers going into this, and I was not only able to get a result so quickly, but I was able to get a result that I was happy enough with that I would use on my table. And that's a really empowering experience, because I can tell you that there's nothing more frustrating than getting into a new hobby and finding that the hardware for the unit that you've purchased isn't assembling correctly, or there are things that are broken or bent, or the software isn't working correctly, or you just can't understand it because it's just not presented in a way that's user-friendly, or if the documentation doesn't make any sense, so you can't even assemble a unit in the first place. Those are all really difficult hurdles to overcome, and they can absolutely stop you from getting into a new hobby. So the fact that I was able to get some pretty good results with such little effort definitely makes me feel like this is a good unit for anyone who's looking at just getting into laser engraving. I also really appreciate the fact that it has a pretty large working area. 400 by 400 millimeters is a pretty good size, so I feel like I can start off on projects that are a little smaller, like the Basswood sheets that I was using, but I have the ability to upgrade and kind of move into a larger project later on without having to worry about size constraints, because I mean, it's a pretty good working area. So I feel like there's a lot that this unit has to offer, and I would definitely recommend the Ortur Laser Master 2 Pro S2. Overall, I had a great experience, and I'm really excited at seeing what I can do with it in the future. Alright, I hope you found this review helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and I really appreciate it. And if you like the work that I'm doing here and you want to support my channel, you can find my Patreon link down below. Alright, now let's go print or laser something.